as Christians from all over the world reflect on Jesus' sacrifice for humankind, today we are called to reflect on important issues such as sin, law, and atonement. We will be giving two perspectives, one from the Old Testament and the other from the New Testament, as Gail said. But first of all, it is important to give or clarify few concepts so that as we grow, things can be easy to grasp and understand. Let us start by looking at the concept of sin. Specifically, the understanding that the Old Testament people had about it. The concept of sin did go through many changes throughout time, and it can be assigned many meanings in the Bible. But in the Old Testament, most of the time, sin is linked to human relations. In this case, it is related to the person or to the individual to be deceived, to fall short. This can be used in relation to one another, but the word is commonly used to describe the fall towards God. For example, in our relationship with the Creator, to fall short of the mark God sets for us can be seen as a sin. It is true that there is another understanding of sin, that which means disobedience towards God. And most of us are familiar with this concept than in the previous one, maybe because of the many examples we find in the Bible. For instance, Adam and Eve disobeying God's commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge, or Moses and Aaron when lied about who was going to give them water by striking the rock. This attitude did not please God and had consequences. In both instances, they had to be punished for their disobedience to God. Adam and Eve lost their place in the Garden of Eden. Moses did not enter the promised land. So, this helps us to set a pattern to understanding that in the Old Testament, the predominant understanding of sin has to do with the relationship of mankind with God, in which the community was always reminded and still is reminded that breaking this relationship can bring huge consequences. Therefore, to help the community to stay with God, there was a need to have certain guidelines so that God's people could always have it, study it, and put it into practice, which is the law. 5 books of law, to be precise, that you can find in the so-called Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. These books would be able to guide the people because more than a book of law, they are more likely to be known as a book of instruction or the book of teaching. These books would guide the way of living of the community and their interactions with God and also with one another. The way people treated each other and the way they related to their God. This law also established certain cultural laws, such as circumcision. The last concept that we will have to look at it is the atonement. In the Old Testament, this was understood as the action to sacrifice an innocent animal on behalf of the sinner to purify the one that disobeyed God. Through this, one could be in the right relationship with God. It is evident that the three concepts have a relation those relationships. The Old Testament concept, account of the fall of humankind and its consequences, show the reflection of God over sin as it proves the separation between the Creator, which is God, and the creation, which is humankind. Sin can only be stemmed by an act of an atonement. There was still need to end the hostility between God and humankind, abase God's anger, and forgiveness and reconciliation to be effective because of the fall of humankind. God organized this by not only coming back to look for the lost Adam and condemning the humankind of the act of rebellion, but he went on and made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. This shows that the act of reconciliation or atonement proceeded from God and not from humankind. God said to the Israelites, I have given it for you upon the altar to make atonement for your soul. In Leviticus 17 verse 11. God did not only give them the notion of atonement, but also the procedure of fulfilling it by appointing sacrifice as a divine way of securing atonement, not because of any value inherent in the sacrificial routine. There was no value. The first step in this procedure was the selection of a proper animal without defect. That's why everywhere you would hear you must get the fat cow, you must get it had to be perfect. It must be suited for the atonement. The unblemished nature of the victim here is the necessary ingredient for the atonement, for it indicates the necessity of perfection. The second aspect of this concept was in Aaron laying his hand on the head of the scapegoat, confessing over all the wickedness and the rebellion on the head of that goat. This symbolizes that the transfer of sin from the offerer to the sacrifice. Who is to carry the sin to a solitary place? That the sins were never to be remembered. The third aspect, and the most important, was the slaughtering of the animal. This symbolized the profound truth that sinners are only worthy of death. In this way, the victim therefore fulfills a double right. It symbolizes the life of the guilty one, and its death symbolizes the death which is the punishment for sin. But the victim is at the same time the intermediary by which God communicates his life to the sinner. Therefore, the essential point about the sacrifice is not the death of the victim, but the offering of its life, on whose account the victim was offered. What more do scriptures tell us? In the chapter that Ron just read for us, 2 Samuel chapter 24, we read about David, who was given strength by God to be able to defeat other nations, which made the Israelites grow in numbers, and they continued to conquer. The passage records that David was determined to count the men who were able to fight in Israel. It is plausible that he wanted to count the people so that he can weigh his success The danger of getting to that point is we become more self-absorbed and we want to take credit instead of giving credit to God. God brought arose for the Israelites because of David's doing, and a punishment was brought upon them. A relationship was broken between the Israelites and God because a sin was committed. Therefore, the atonement was needed to make amends between God and the Israelites, and also between God and David. David knew that he needed to ask forgiveness of all his sins so that he can be able to be reconciled to God. David bought a threshing floor. On that threshing floor, he offered a sacrifice to the Lord for his sins. This threshing floor is a traditional place where Abraham offered Isaac and was the place where David's son Solomon built the temple. What is the spiritual significance of the threshing floor? The threshing floor in Scripture is a place of separation and revelation. A place where the harvest was prepared by separating the grain from the useless straw, for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable parts of the crop. The threshing process is a beautiful picture of worship and a metaphor for sanctification. The threshing floor as a place of worship is where God's provision for humankind is uncovered. It is a place where people would go and confront their sin and make a sacrifice so that their sins may be forgiven. So, David realized his wrong and see a need to follow the process God outlined in order for him to be cleansed. I'm pretty sure you can already think of many other examples you have read about in the Old Testament. The problem with this way of asking for forgiveness is that it had to be done again and again and again, because as humans, we sin naturally. So it means David would do the sacrifice today, will do the sacrifice tomorrow, will do the sacrifice another week, just like this. The readings shows us a pattern from the themes we are reflecting today. A sin committed by David, breaking the law given to him by God, and atonement made in order to re-establish the relationship and attain God's forgiveness.